Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon. Let's say it all together. You're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. Where this week, we're sticking a bow on it. Season all wrapped up and we only have, one last thing to do. It's the only thing we can do, and that is review it all. So let's go back in time together to see how shrewd or perhaps misguided we all were about each top flight team's impending season. So sit back, relax. It's time for the season finale of 2025-2026 of Kick a Match. Yes, you've finally made it to the podcast that every single other episodes we've done this year has been leading up to. If you don't know, this podcast starts every year with a massive prediction show. It's the most listened to podcast I do every year, and we are going to be reacting to clips from what is officially, and has been all year, the most listened to podcast this entire thing has ever done. And I've brought the gang back together for it all. I've got, from around the grounds and Ross Welsh.
Evening, Peter.
And Joe McCallion.
Hello, Peter.
Now, the tradition here of the end of season pod is now 3 to 4 series deep. But you guys are the first people to repeat it. Second year in a row. So you obviously know what you're in for because you said all these things that we're going to look back upon. But in turn, you've also been here before where you've had to face the music. There's some teams here, there's some thoughts, there's some texts, which people have been waiting with receipts with all year.
Yeah, as you say, Peter, been here before. We should probably know better. But when you're doing that pre-season predictions, you forget that you actually have to come back and stand by what you said.
Looking back on this season, and some way, somehow, it's not over by time of recording. There's still this truncated European playoff to be done. It's been a good one. I've liked it. I've enjoyed it. You know, it's not always about the pure entertainment value of it all, but I think I'll look back upon it as a season perhaps of transition, where we saw properly the dismantling of what was the quote-unquote top six, and that it wasn't really a monopoly, of course, but the stranglehold that those 6 teams had on it for years upon years upon years. You would say out with the old boss, in with the new boss, and instead of that now we have 4 full-time teams who seem like they're not going to be kicked off that perch for a while. Of course, not all of them are guaranteed to be being full-time long-term anyway, but that feels like the biggest change this year.
Yeah, there was there's big mix-up in that regard. Teams not doing as well as they were forecast to do. So there's definitely not the hard stop after 6 anymore. I think you can see a couple of those teams in the bottom half pushing on towards the top 6 even more so than Dungannon did this year.
Would that be the same for you, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. I think the talk there that you say of the full-time teams, it's really interesting, obviously, where they ended up. So it'd be interesting for the rest of the league as to how that continues to progress out with the following 8 teams, and what sort of mini league as such could develop there over the next few years if that's the way it continues to go.
But one of the new things that we saw was that if you won the League Cup, which was the real high point of Linfield's season, one of few, and it means that they're automatically in the final. Now, previously we've had some form of a gauntlet where teams have to go through multiple rounds, etc. Sometimes it's been a bit of a gauntlet with a bit of a semi-final, whatever. This is kind of wick. I can't be doing this every year. Now, I know it's just because of where Linfield finish, etc., etc. But it just feels weird that we're going to have a game between Carrick and Dungannon, and then the winner of that is going to be going to Solitude to play against Cliftonville, and then the winner of that will then eventually be going to Linfield, and the winner will take all, and Linfield are the favourites. It wouldn't really matter if like one of the top 3 who are already in Europe had won it. You would go back to the usual, whatever it is, 4th versus 7th, etc. But this is not a great result, I find, from this exciting new plan that Nifl brought in.
No, and in the first of all, I like the idea of doing something a little bit different with the League Cup, but in their press release, it said the winner of the League Cup will be away in the final, but it then doesn't matter because Linfield came 4th anyway and secured the highest seeding and the home draw, so it didn't really work out that way. in essence, it has been ineffective and nothing's changed. It is strange because then you lose the Linfield will not have played for a long time. So if a Carrick can get momentum up, a Carrick or Dungannon, then they could fly through and Linfield be caught cold. Same with Cliftonville to an extent, but it's hard to then make that work. At least one team's gonna have to wait if that's how you're doing it.
Saying that, Joe, your boys, you've won one of these playoffs before, so it's maybe a good thing.
I don't massively dislike it. I don't think I have any huge opinions either way on what way it goes, but I can see obviously what Ross is saying in terms of he's Linfield not going to be playing for a long time. Glenville have come a long way before, as you say. So who the likes of Dungannon and Carrick starting off that gauntlet, as you say, could be a real sort of a real push for them.
Fellas, I don't think we should hold back the goodies too much longer. What will happen here is we'll go via the table rankings. So we'll start with 12th and we'll go all the way up to 1, looking back on what we thought it was going to go, what way it was going to go down, and we'll see who was right and who was wrong, who was a good prognosticator and who wasn't. And outside that, we'll just talk about how fans will feel their season went and maybe some of the highlights along the way. Are you prepped? Are you ready?
I've got my digital receipts gathered. My Twitter bookmarks are there, so bring it on.
We start this year with a team who will not be gracing us every week in the podcast, or maybe they will when we become a semi-championship podcast. Was it a surprise that Glenavon ended up being the team who lost its top flight status? Who's going to score Glenavon up in the mid-table? Peter Campbell again?
Yeah, it's hard to sit here and actually think about where they're going to get their goals from. I think it's going to be a very, very patchy season from them of, the odd time they're sort of grabbing late wins and getting goals sort of out of nowhere. I don't think they're going to have a standout goal scorer. I think goals will kind of come in bits, but from all over the pitch. They're probably, for me, going to be the most sturdy. Going into games, you could probably guess how it's going to go. You'll probably have a reasonable idea of how their season's going to pan out after the first couple of weeks.
I have them as 10th.
I put them as 8th. I don't quite have them flirting with that last European playoff spot if it drops down, but I think Glenavon fans will just be happy enough where they're not looking down the barrel of 11th or 12th.
I also have them down in 8th, and it's exactly for that reason. It's just a case of, for Paddy this year, just getting a bit of stability. As Ross is saying there, absolutely take. I think they'll probably do the best against the teams in and around them down there. They won't be getting those real explosive wins against someone in the top 6.
And we're off to a flyer, ladies and gentlemen. It is fair to say that they weren't going to get those explosive wins. They struggled to get big wins against anybody. I mean, I knew that none of us really saw them finishing 12th, but 8th, fellas. How?
Turns out we just don't know our stuff, Peter, and this is the podcast that exposes.
You don't get to be that down on yourselves this early. Like, let's be fair.
No.
Glenavon came in with a really nice, from like a pure football managery point of view, really nice transfer window. They got young. They tried to bring in value. They had a manager who had just come from Derry, had done great things with Cliftonville. Everyone was giving him a parade because he decided to move to 3 days a week training. And everybody thought this was going to perhaps not be massively remarkable, but this was a team who was putting on their big boy boots and were going to be really sensible, and that they were going to get value, not blow anybody out of the water wage-wise, even though it seems now looking back, maybe decent wages were handed out. But this was a disaster. It had a moment near the end, but it was a disaster. And it'll be a warning for so many teams over the next 5 years in this league. You get your recruitment wrong, you're in trouble. And that is the main cause, is what we've talked about all year. What went wrong at Glenavon? They got their recruitment horribly wrong. And despite Michael O'Connor coming in and giving them a boost, you said it, Joe, how they start the season was going to have an impact on how they ended it. They didn't get a win until October. Didn't get a point until October.
Yeah, and that was absolutely crazy to be witnessing as well. Like, obviously football's not played on paper, but on paper it seemed like it would be okay. I never envisioned 12th right off the bat. It suddenly looked like, God, this team are in some serious trouble here. And evidently, Paddy just was not the right man. He's clearly a good manager, but it just, whether it's just managing a team that's in down around there where you're having to maybe fight for your wins a bit more and you need players to maybe work outside of their own positions. Maybe he's not quite the man for that, or maybe that isn't the talent that he hired for and didn't expect that. But yeah, it was a really, really poor season from him.
Those who were in charge of Glenavon at the time have somewhat not felt the heat that McLaughlin, like, you think about this and you look back at this season for Glenavon, everybody's just pointing at McLaughlin and co. Like, is there no recompense? Is there no blame to be shared elsewhere bar him?
You have to wonder, was he just given complete control of everything, almost like a director of football?
Well, that's what people here still at the club would want you
Yeah,
to
well,
believe.
that
That's what you
seems to be
want.
the narrative being trotted out by fans and stuff. So if you assume that is the case, fair enough to give him all the grief. The recruitment was obviously shockingly wrong. I'm not saying anything new there. The fact it got close towards the end gives you that glimmer of hope and makes you think it's maybe a better season than it was. But obviously safe to say nobody here was expecting that. Worth saying, I said they will not be flirting with the European spots. So there's the first prediction right of the year. So happy days.
If that's the way you're looking at it, like eighth for both of you, what do you think you were so confident about? Because my big concern was, McDaid and O'Connor did not instill me with much joy and happiness. No one was really calling the step up, and ultimately the total reliance which was required on McGovern. And he did his bit. Like, Peter Campbell was not fit for the whole season, so he wasn't the man scoring the goals. There was much talked about the idea of that they were going to, because they brought in all these defensive recruits, Murphy, McClelland, etc., that they were going to be building from the back, and they were getting young, and they were getting strong in an area of relative weakness compared to their contemporaries in and around the middle to lower in the league. That screw became loose almost instantly, and when the back end fell out, no one was saving them up top.
For me, the sort of optimism came from it seemed like Paddy McLaughlin had almost turned the corner for them a little bit. You know, with it up the training to 3 days a week, it seemed to be happening for them a little bit more towards the end of last season. But obviously the wheels came off pretty quickly. The recruitment looked promising. There was a lot of hype around Harry Murphy and Kyle McClellan, those sort of names. But at the end, you could see why Glentoran and Coleraine were happy enough for them to head out the door.
There was also an aspect leading to a bit of confidence, and it maybe adds a wee bit of thing into how much control Paddy had in the likes of Chris Lowe and stuff coming in, and Mallon that he'd worked with at Cliftonville. Like, they were players that played really well underneath him at Cliftonville, and I thought them going to Glenavon, he could maybe get a similar sort of tune out of them again. And that on top of some of the other players Ross mentioned there is kind of what led to a bit more confidence. But obviously, as the season played out, that didn't really work.
In the end, it was a miracle for them to try and stay up. It it was helped the fact that it almost did happen due to just, how poor in the end Crews were and how they fell through. But maybe it has hit them, maybe it hasn't. But Glenavon are out of the top flight, and they were always seen as a team who did good recruitment, sensible youth development, were calm under pressure, and were really good at home. But this league continues to change time and time again. Were they unlucky in a couple of games? Of course they were, like everybody is. But across the season, usually what will come out, and it will showcase really where you are as a team. Like, they did get everybody excited post kind of late January till maybe kind of early to mid-March, but in the end, too little, too late. And they could have saved their bacon late on in the season, and they didn't.
Really, really poor split. Really poor split. 3 points, and they went into the split a point behind Crusaders and ended at 8 points behind. So that's obviously not what you needed at that time of the year. So disappointing to have a fizzle out. I think everybody was starting to believe once they beat Crusaders at Seaview, but just sort of faltered from there on.
Well, do you think for other teams either going up or sitting in the league, what will they take from this Glenavon season? Is it invest more up top? Is it that perhaps they need to act more quickly when it comes to management changes? Like, everybody can go back and listen back to the full thoughts on that team. We just didn't expect, and maybe that's the real lesson to take from this, we just didn't expect kind of boring old Glenavon and how sensible they have been for the bottom to fall out quite dramatically. And at the start, you're six games out without a win. You're all of a sudden you're at 7 games, 8 games, 9 games. You're thinking, this is bad, and they're just gonna have a tough season. But to see them completely out of the league now, it really did go from bad to worse. It's unfortunate, but there's only 12 spots in the top flight, and we said in a previous pod there, like, just because you've got fans and a nice ground doesn't mean that you get to be there every year.
No, absolutely not. And it's an aspect of all those things for the teams coming up, Peter. I think one of the main things when anytime I watched them, it always felt like there was it's a huge cliche, but 11 individuals on the pitch. It never really felt like they were pulling in the same direction. Never felt like they were playing to the same sort of game plan whatsoever. And when you're like that for the whole first half of the season, then you have no hope of going anywhere.
How do you think they're set up for next year? They'll go in as massive favourites into the championship. They're trying to keep a bit of continuity with O'Connor, who they've backed. We will see money and how much this takeover, which came through kind of almost, you might say, too little too late, kind of in January direction, like what that we'll see. But we could see a significant exodus. And if there's one thing we're pointing at why it went wrong for Glenavon, it was just there was too many players turning over. Like, it feels like for them, they're probably going to have to commit to 1 or 2 players and kind of give them top flight money. I'm sure many of their fans would say, I know who I want to go and I know who I want to stay. But it's not as easy as just going out with you and Peter Campbell, you don't go nowhere. That might be the case. He may decide to go for a year in the championship. He'll view it as with Glenavon and then come up and be all guns blazing in 27, 28. But like I said, the biggest comparison to them is probably Portadown going down, and they did scrape up a couple of seasons ago, but they did make a hash of it a couple of years ago. Lockall, dreadful this year, really poor. We all know what happened with Newry 2 seasons ago. Warrenpoint's kind of a weirder example. It's just we are yet to see what we see in kind of English football, where we're having yo-yo teams. Maybe Glenavon could be that, but a year's a long time away. So it's going to be a tough year, and we really don't know what a 16-team championship looks like, and they don't even know how it's going to work. Like, they haven't even decided how it's going to work. They're going, what do you guys think? Maybe 3 and a 1, or we all play 2? It's very odd. Like, they had all year to chat about this.
Yeah, that is poor. They also don't know what's going on with the PIL because that's all sort of legal dispute and stuff. So would have been better to have that sorted more than a month or 2 before it starts. But that won't be helping Glenavon. The championship is always seen as a bit of quicksand for the bigger teams anyway. And you've got your mainstays, your Welders, your Queens are going to be up around it next year, your Annas. They're going to be desperate to get up, and they're still, despite being 16 teams, there's still only going to be 1 automatic place. So as we've seen with Loughgall, it's easy to just get sucked down into mid-table mediocrity when you go down. So Glenavon, I'm sure, will have plans on just getting out of there as quick as they can. How they do that, I don't know. The boys on the relegation pod the other week were sort of bemoaning the fact that your Matthew Snoddies and whatnot had left with all their experience. that's going to be more important next year, Irish League experience, because boys from the English non-league, they're not going to cope in that championship.
Yeah, and in the end, just the way the season wrapped up, you're not totally back in. And also, what you're maybe 2, 3 players were on loan. Like Lindsay, I know wasn't starting week in, week out, but Ferris and Falls, they were kind of loan players as well. So I think we're all going to be fascinated by what Glenavon do, and do they try and be cute, or do they need to think outside the box? A really fascinating case study. But we're off. We've got 11 more of these to go, and so far, well, you guys were 4 places out. I was, well, only 2. I would like to say I would take some minor credit to say I foretold a bit of a decline, maybe just didn't back them to decline as much as they eventually did do. And we all know what Ross thought about some other teams. Okay, we will go to the team who finished 11th, and as we spent a lot of time last week talking about, it was Crusaders. Did any of us feel this was on the cards? Here's what I'd say about the Cruise. If anybody is saying defiantly they know exactly what this Cruise team are going to be this season, they're either a liar or they're braver than I am, because this is just a complete unknown. I am expecting a step back, and maybe a significant one.
Because now what is this team? You can't have Thorndyke as your sort of golden piece in the middle. Like that is like eighth, ninth sort of behavior.
And that is why I put them as 9th.
Oh, Peter. There's this year's Port's 12th. Wow. I went 7.
Or, and I'm not saying that because I think that they're so a million miles away from a team's couple of places above them. I just think it could be close amongst a number of teams, and I just see them shaking down the tree. Does that then say, Ross, you completely disagree?
Well, I just don't think they're that much worse than Cliftonville.
I have them down in 7th, same as Ross.
If this is the reset year, then what was the point of last year?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
What was it?
Well, I totally agree. I feel like I threw Crusaders under the bus a wee bit last year, kind of come January, because I thought, what are you achieving by not blooding the players? And of course, all those young fellas they've brought in could do great things, and that's what they're hoping for, and that's what the coach is there to do. I don't think Cadell's under a huge amount of pressure unless it goes really, really bad. But here's a combination for not a particularly successful season. You're not particularly strong at home. Your back line is all over the place, and you're not scoring goals. And who's to argue all 3 of them is not predictive with Crusaders? It was not a recipe for success, and that's exactly how it played out. And this may be the new norm for Cruise. I think that's what I was really trying to say earlier on this year, maybe at the live show, which of course you need to be there to hear, that the feeling was going into this year is that we have a new middle class in the league, and it extends pretty much from 5th almost to 12th. And, teams like Glenavon and Crusaders were the massive losers here. Yeah, we gave Cruise a bit of stick for playing all these older experienced players, and they were not preparing for the future. They took, for whatever reason, maybe financial, maybe strategic, they decided to go for a complete 180 on that strategy, and it nearly saw them out of the league altogether. Why do you think you were more positive about the Cruise and didn't see what eventually did occur coming?
I am still shocked at just how bad it went. Ross said it there. I think I said it during the prediction as well, of like, it was clear they were doing a full reset, and it should have happened the season before. There was a lot of players out, a lot of players in, and it was obvious it was going to be a transition year, but that transition year came so close to killing them, to the point where it was only for the fact that Glenavon were so poor. I know they're not brilliant, but they still have enough decent quality that they should not have finished 11th, in my opinion.
And remember, we were talking about a team who still had O'Rourke, still had Clark, and you may have hoped that some of the other players were going to develop. Like I think players like Brooks and Dunlop in particular, they had far better pre-seasons than what we saw. Like no one I think was predicting Bryden was going to be the star out of that class.
No, the recruitment in general looked quite exciting. Looking at the names, a lot coming from Scotland, teams like Inverness and stuff, big teams, and then it never panned out for whatever reason. I agree with Joseph. The quality was there to an extent, and it certainly wasn't bad enough or it didn't appear bad enough to have them down as low as 11th. But something obviously just went seriously wrong throughout the year, and they just never really got it going at any point.
Well, what did seriously go wrong? Again, it's that big R word, recruitment. For all the feeling that they have the inside track, they'll pick out offers like it's going out of fashion. You might argue that they did. They found Bryden. I don't think he's the same skill, quality, or potential as offered, but they still found a striker when other teams like couldn't find one for love nor money. And you might argue some of the other players just didn't really live up to the hype. They lost players at the back that they never were able to recoup. They came in to the season like really light there and never got better. And I feel like there's a sentiment between us all that we are yet to see, especially after the January transfer window, where Glenavon reacted quite strongly. Crusaders kind of shrugged their shoulders and tried to check in. Was there any players other teams might want rid of, and we'll give them a go? Like it's clear, like Crews are not in the same stratosphere that they used to be, but are they so far down the pecking order from just overall how they're run, what they can offer other players, that the only way they can be anyway competitive is to zig towards this Scottish or English recruitment, not shop in the Irish League circles, and that means they're just going to be boom or bust, because I don't see them being as aggressive for other players this summer that people around them, Ballymena, Portadown, Carrick are going to be. And if you're the last one at the table, you need to be lucky, because those lottery tickets rarely provide winners.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to be feeding off scraps. You would imagine a lot of the big names aren't going to stick around there. Your Thorndikes, your Brydens, stuff like that. The guy Ruff they got in from Stranraer in January, you'd imagine he won't stick around too much longer. It's it's grim reading for Crusaders, and in hindsight, I think it goes back to the opening day of the season. They're 3-0 up against Carrick, and there's just no leadership to be found, and they end up losing 4-3, and that's the start of everything. But you can't blame it all on one game, obviously. But what Crusaders turns up next year, much like this year, I just do not know.
Are you guys surprised as I am that there aren't maybe more questions around Cadell? Like, you don't ever want someone to lose their job as such. It seems like Crusaders are backing him, but like as Ross and I both said, there is enough quality in that team not to finish 11th.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Like there was a feeling there that like Cadell should be fine as long as it doesn't like totally fall off a cliff. They were teetering. They've been teetering for months,
Yeah.
and time and time again, after a stinking performance, he was stuck there in front of a camera going, wasn't quite good today, pretty much. And at some point, like the bill has to come due. Like there is no doubt going in the next year. Like he should be under pressure. There's a chance maybe he could be moved on. He decides I can't be bothered doing this anymore over the next few weeks, and you wouldn't be massively surprised by that. But some of the, you can say, blame or responsibility has to be put onto his shoulders. The season before they saw the drop off, that was expected, and the feeling was, let's see how they go next year, this year, now that he's got a year of experience under his belt. And the answer has been, well, there's been little to no improvement, perhaps even regression.
The fact that he has lasted to the end of the season makes me think they're going to give him in the next season anyway. his saving grace was almost who was out there to replace him. The names being touted for sort of all the jobs were, your Oren Kearney's who end up going to Ballymena, your Gary Hamilton was getting linked to every job, but he seems happy enough at Ballymacash. Who would have been out there to replace him? The option for another club would have been someone within the club, your Jim Irvins and stuff like that. But he was that option already that exhausted that. So I just don't know. They're really Crusaders are looking like they're in a dead end in almost every aspect of the club.
Yeah, like it seems like it's a club, especially after the decades that it was with Baxter. Like culture's clear. There's so much noise around what's going on behind the scenes with this club and how stable or not they are. And that may bear fruit, or it may just be exactly what it currently is, just chitter chatter, hearsay. But if we're just focusing on what we know and what we've seen on the pitch, it's not particularly great. They need a massive kick up the backside, and they need to find players. But I just don't know where they're coming from. Particularly experience and a bit of physicality. Like, you see there with the football writers like Williamson getting a nomination for Young Player of the Year. That's a player who's still a teenager and gets lots of kudos. But he fundamentally can't make a difference and do all the nice things that he can do when they're pretty much asking him to be, a ready-made Irish League player, both physically and mentally. And I just don't think he's there yet. But they have to rely on him. And in some big positions, they looked weak. Backline, midfield, and they locked out some wingers and strikers. But in turn, at times, I find them really awkward because they just couldn't hold up the ball. They couldn't find a pass. It's all just a bit ramshackle is the word I would say. So, look, I have got some absolute lashings online from Cruise fans who just, I think after a season that they've faced, cannot face any more criticism. And of course, what we're all saying is criticism. We didn't expect it fully to go as bad as it did. But in the same way of Glenavon, of course there's going to be lessons to be learnt, but no one is doing this cruise model. But maybe it's out of necessity.
No, nobody is following this path. They're trying to follow the full-time models of we can't only shop in the Irish League, but they're obviously not a full-time team, so they can't pay the premium that you need to get the surefire players. The thing for me all season is they just look lightweight throughout, and that's just never what you would have associated with Crusaders. And maybe that's the past just going against them slightly unfairly, but whatever they've tried the past 2 seasons, it hasn't worked. They've had the odd success in Offord and Bryden and Debaga, but it just hasn't looked good. On the other hand, if they'd have managed to beat Bangor, they'd have been level on points with Bangor. So it ended up kind of similar to Glenavon. One burst of form has ended up making it look a lot better than it actually was.
Is there any lessons for yourself maybe going into next year? Because we now have both Glenavon and Crews were the bottom two. I picked them as 10th and 9th. You went for 8th and 7th. That, these names counts for nothing.
No, they certainly don't. Will I consider that going forward? No. I'll still, put it on 12th always. But it just shows you like a lot can change over the course of a summer. Carrick, who we'll go on to talk about, were in the relegation playoff the year before, and they're very comfortable 7th now. So it is that bottom 6 is just even bottom 7 or 8 now, as we talked about, is just very changeable, and anybody can sort of end up anywhere.
Totally agree. Right, let's go for a team now that finished 10th, and they did it what felt like pretty comfortably. Unless they start strong, I think they're in deficits. There's no doubt that they'll be in a relegation fight all year. I'm not expecting them to do what Newry did. Well, it went a wee bit late, but Newry come up, not even a playoff. Loughgall come up, almost got in the top 6. Portadown come up, something very similar. I'm not expecting Bangor to continue that trend.
No, I'm with you there. I think it'll be a tough enough season. I do think they'll be better than what Loughgall were last year.
I think they'll be relatively comfortable going into March, April.
I can't see it. As someone who's backed a lot of these teams coming up, no one was a bigger Loughgall believer than I was. I have them straight going down at 12. I just worry. I think that I worry about them at the back. And I think other teams are going to exploit that, particularly when Bangor are away. And unless things change, it's just going to be a very difficult season for Bangor, in my opinion. But look, these sides coming up, I've proved a lot of other people wrong. Maybe it's time for me to be the one that gets this wrong about a team that goes up.
I only have them slightly above in 11th, so they'll certainly be fighting.
I've got them 10th. I think they'll be okay in the end.
You think there's two teams who across 38 games are going to be worse off than Bangor?
Comfortably. Yep.
Comfortably. Ross, you can take your maybe only victory lap here.
And I will do. Two teams were comfortably worse than them, and I don't think I actually specified in the preview who those teams would be. So
no, but you could argue that it maybe wasn't only two, that you may say, based on what went down and based on how the season ended, that Bangor could have been a wee bit higher if they were really that worried about position.
I'd
The
argue
only thing they worried about was safety, and they got it with games to go.
Yep, I would argue there was four teams over the course of the season. Certainly up to the split anyway. There was four teams worse than Bangor. But realistically, they've been on the beach really early on. Actually, they were safe after a really good start. So I think their position in 10th is almost a bit of an injustice to them.
An injustice, Joe.
Yeah, well, I agree on the sense of they were absolutely fantastic throughout the season until they didn't need to be anymore. Obviously, first day of the season, they had me in tears, and that was kind of where we went from there. I thought they were brilliant for what they needed to do throughout the year.
The start was really important. Like, we've seen with pretty much every single one of these teams in recent times, Newry, Portadown, Loughgall, and now Bangor. If you don't start strong, you're in trouble. And you might say that maybe for Bangor, and I'm not the only one to have said this, that perhaps their second season slump maybe began in February because, they weren't safe. Of course they weren't, but they really looked golden from about November.
Yeah, it was a lightning start. They were taking on all comers. They only won, I'm just looking here, 4 games since the middle of October. So that shows how good that start was. And there's your blueprint for Lima Valley coming up next year. You gotta come out of the traps pretty smart and just start getting points on the board. The old adage, you'd rather have points on the board than be chasing. Absolutely, because they got the job done early and they were able to stay up off the back of 4 wins across the bulk of the season. So it just shows how important that is.
Like, they were a tricky side. If we're looking at blueprints here, and we're saying it more and more, they maybe signed a couple of unfashionable players, older players that maybe you thought, I'm kind of talking about hockey here, to be honest. Like, there's really much to be done there. Like, they're coming out smelling of total roses with Lynch. Like, Glenavon fans are like, what is going on here? The players, I think he's getting like underage Northern Ireland call-ups, chat of being a move across the way. Like, if that comes true, well done to him. But like, he's been a bright young spark. The players that brought up, like, we know he was a dogged performer in the Irish Cup, but how much did we all back that Rhys Neal was going to be a player that we all knew played for Bangor? And of course, the secret sauce, we knew he was going to be a really key player for them. As in Ben Arthurs, and look, we can't talk about it too much because we just don't know the absolute circumstances, but maybe that marriage is about to end. But he wasn't the only one. I think they worked well with adding in with Kushti, kind of similar style player. Mulvena was really strong as well, and they just worked super, super hard. I do think they're going to have to go again, and second season syndrome is going to be real next year, but you would say that they look a far more appealing place to go to than other teams. And they actually do something which not a lot of the other teams we were talking about in Ports, Loughall and Uri and stuff, like they are hard to beat. Like this kind of reputation of they play football the right way, like Bangor could be a wee bit boring. Like they're tough and they're rugged, but no way are they merely bruisers. They're very efficient, and there might be a couple of games there where fans thought, oh, we could maybe sneak more. But the amount of draws that they were able to work through with better teams, and the amount of times by just keeping their powder dry, they were able to sneak a win out of nowhere is very impressive. And give Feeney his dues. He has been massively pragmatic this entire season, and he's done something Bangor haven't done at all this century, and that's have a second season in the top flight. Very impressive. You can't not be delighted if you are a fan of the Seasiders.
Yeah, absolutely. Hats off to Lee Finney, because if you look at the way Bangor play football this season compared to the Championship, it's like two completely different sides, and it takes a lot of bravery to go and make that change with that group of players. He knew where his strengths were in that team, and he played to them. And yeah, it's not the prettiest. They used to in the Championship, when I watched them, they played some pretty nice football. They keep it on the ground the odd time, but he knew where his strengths were. He knew that probably wouldn't pay off in the top flight, and he made that change, and it's paid off for them. Yeah, as you say, the interesting part now is what happens next season. Does he stick to that? Does he start to make a change now that players are used to playing in that top flight? Um, I personally think he'll probably stick with something similar, and it might not be the prettiest to watch.
I like the three at the back. I hate three at the back for a lot of teams, but actually, I've just seen it so many times this year be really effective.
Works at that ground as well, doesn't it?
Tricky pitch, dark floodlights and all that jazz. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Cliches all around here, good at home, etc., etc. Got the odd shock. But I think that maybe the 2026 we've had so far for Bangor, there's a few worrying moments of, well, we can't let that slide totally next season. But well deserved to be a top flight team next year. Well done all. But the work for next season starts right now. Okay, moving up to ninth, and maybe it should be said at this point, and I can say it because I'm the host. Guys, you just can't go for simple predictions here. You have to swing for the fences at times, and they don't always go out of the park. Ballymena.
They'll be more than okay for relegation, but I think they'll sort of be dreaming of up towards seventh.
I think if they don't finish top six, there's significant heat and pressure.
I think that's too far. I think that's slightly too far.
Hold on. With Ben Kennedy, with Darragh O'Connor, who there was a bidding war for, you have all those players in midfield. You are able to get Matthew Clark, Toure in. I do worry against the Linfields and the likes. They could get torn apart and look a bit poor from a shape point of view. But I just think there's something strong about this side in its core that should see them through. This is the one I don't like particularly, but I've got them sixth.
I have them down in ninth.
Wow.
I'm coming from a very different viewpoint from you, where I do think they'll have good games, but I just more worry about their form throughout the season.
I've went ninth myself as well, just for similar reasons. I don't think I can see
I'm
them.
surprised by that.
I can't see them stringing together like 4 or 5 wins on the spin. I don't think they have that in them, just because I think they're a bit blunt at the top.
Probably a good enough squad for a bit of a cup run or something. They might have some sort of success this season. And don't get me wrong, I think if things start to click, as Ross said earlier, their ceiling is so high, I could see them getting into the top six, but I just don't think that's realistic given how the season will play out.
Zero clicking happened. And in fact, one of the more, how can I say this, anonymous seasons from any team this year. Did Ballymena play a top flight football this year? I'm led to believe they did, but I don't know if many people outside of Ballymena have very strong memories.
I felt like, I didn't know if it was too harsh to say they've had a nothing season, but I think that's exactly what
Totally nothing season. In every sense of the word. Not one exciting game, not one breakthrough player. They couldn't score goals. They struggled to keep them out. Every fan base probably has that frustrating game. They probably should have beat Ballymena more. And look, the one thing we're right about is unless they got top six, things were going to change. Things have changed. Jim Irvin ain't there. But Owen Kearney came in and so far is just taking his time around getting them back to where he thinks, I guess the people funding this side thinks they should be.
Yeah, I think when Kearney came in, a lot of people looked at that as that was going to be the thing that did make everything click in the end, but it absolutely didn't happen. He had a bit of a rotten start outside of the Boxing Day win, and then it never really picked up after the start either. So nothing season is exactly right. I think they will have been more than happy ending up in ninth by the end of it. And maybe looking towards next year for Kearney to start building something. But Jim Irvin feels aggrieved. He was shown the door, and going off what happened, he maybe has a point.
Why do you say that?
Because nothing really changed. I think they were realistically safe when he left, just because of the two really poor teams at the bottom, and he's coming out of it looking pretty good. In that the Oran Kearney hasn't been able to get a tune out of them either.
Yeah, like you really do look over the past number of years at Ballymena. It's just you're struggled to see any sort of highlight. In fact, the most remarkable thing people do talk about Ballymena is that, well, they didn't get beat by by Institute. So in the end, Jim Irvin wasn't the man to bring it all together. Owen Kearney comes in with an extensive budget, and he's made a couple of new additions. None of them, well, you might say that Iga Rakowski's been a nice find, but there's plenty of players on the transfer window. They don't come into next season on a bit of an end of season tear. He is going to try and get something out of this team, and I think expectations are going to be similar to what I was suggesting there in last season's pod. There are two open spots in the top six, and Ballymena, with the players that they've got in so far, suggests that they have their eyes on one of them. But something has to change on the pitch for them to be contenders.
They kind of remind me of Crusaders in a sense of there are good individuals in there. It is just getting a tune out of the team together. Something needs to click, and I, I there's just nothing about them that shows that sort of inspiration that that's going to happen. I don't really have huge. Obviously, see how the summer goes and see what sort of transfers happen, but I don't have any huge confidence in them that they're going to be able to break any delve or go much higher than ninth. It just kind of feels like almost that they're happy enough with where they are at the moment. As long as it's safe and you're still in the top flight next year, then that's okay. Which isn't right, and it's not what Ballymena should be aiming for. They should be aiming for the cups. They should be trying to break into that top six. But it kind of feels like there's an aspect now in the last couple of seasons of we're safe. We can just keep going for now.
See, I reckon they are in as good a position as anybody to try and take one of those top six spots, but they just need to improve. And it's hard to say that anything in particular has been an absolute shocker. Like, they go for experience. Matthew Clark, been there, done that. They relied on people like Lafferty, whose time at the club seems to be coming to an end. Okay, they've tried to get new, young, upcoming talent before anybody else grabs it. Jack O'Reilly hasn't become the big starter. They have some youthful players who are still developing, like Corbally. They then go for like a regular name that could make a difference, has been there, done that, top of the league. In Sule, I've been slightly unimpressed by what he's done. They then take a punt on Iga Rakowski. That's worked out, but is that the type of player that's going to really push them forward? He's been a nice piece to add, but again, it all is going to have to come together next year. And I still just feel, from a squad point of view, they are going to have to get better up top, because a lot of pressure on Success Eadigan, and in turn we all have our views on him, on what he can do consistently for them. It's a style of play thing. It just doesn't feel like, as 11 players, they've got an agenda and a motive and a plan that really links up to everybody else's skill set.
Yeah, I forgot that signed Sule, and that was another thing that was looked on as this could change everything for them. But ineffectual return to the Irish League for him. It's tough to know again where do these guys go, because they seem to be the more financially secure end of the part-time teams, in terms of there seems to be money to put in, but the investment just hasn't been right yet. I quite like Success Itigan, but he's not the type of striker that's going to do it all on his own. So you're looking at bringing in a bit more of a proven goal scorer. But as we say every year, all throughout the year, proven goal scorers aren't out there. You can't just magic one up out of thin air. Rutkowski and Edigan together are maybe a goal scorer, but I think you still need another one there.
It could be a little player called Chris McKee, by all accounts. I mean, that is a signing, if it does come off, that doesn't come without its risks and without its opportunities to maybe not go the right way. But they clearly want to back it with players who have been a part of squads near the top end of the pitch. Maybe that's the difference makers for them, but it does feel to me like they are shopping in a new area of the market, and it could improve. I think they'll need big improvements next year. We go up to eighth, and ladies and gentlemen, we go to the main event, Portadown Football Club.
Portadown 12th place.
Wow, this like, is this your gimmick?
No, this is honestly, that is the worst team in the league.
I think they massively overexceeded last year, to be honest. I think they went on obviously a brilliant run. And I think that is maybe going to cause a few strange predictions from some Portadown fans. They might be thinking they're going to finish a bit higher than they will. I have them currently in 10th safe, but it would not surprise me whatsoever if they do fall into a bit of trouble. And look, I said this last year, obviously, and I had a red face when we came to reviewing these predictions, but I just think last season was a wee bit of a bit of an anomaly, to be honest.
They absolutely can take out a big team and then falter against the worst team in the league. So I have them as eighth. I'm strangely the high man, but I mean, you know this yourself. There was a time I was coming into this, I was going to go full Ross, and as many people said, never go full Ross.
Well, people started calling me Chloe Kelly
Why?
because the first time was so nice, I just had to do it twice. Portadown 12th place. They were stinking this calendar year. I just think the squad's poor. I think the manager's poor. 12th.
I don't like it, but I can see it. Look, I will park my patting of the back of getting eighth nailed on, because simply Ross Welsh, Port's 12th. It feels like a meme within Irish League circles. It's a moment. If this podcast ends tomorrow, it's one of the few things people will remember. The floor is yours.
I I will start off by saying we, on the first day of the season, went to Shamrock Park, and I fronted up to this claim and got Portadown fans on camera. It took a shockingly long time to find enough Portadown fans that disagreed with me enough to be on video about it. So there's a very vocal minority on Twitter think they know everything about football now because I've got this one wrong. Was I wrong in the feeling? I don't think so. I think the manager was rubbish. I think the squad is not good. Did they come 12th? No. Colour me shocked. No, they did not. But was this a good season for Portadown? I would also still say no.
Like, to say this out loud, did you actually mean it? Like, did you actually believe that they were the worst team and that they were your favourites to finish 12th? Because I think there's some people that think it's a wind-up.
No, it's what happened after was a wind up. People were there to be wound up at that point. But at the time, I believed Portadown were in it with a shout of being relegated. And for a lot of the season, the dream was alive. Like, it's not as if they went and beat all around them. For a long time, like they only were mathematically safe with what 3 or 4 games to go. Like it's not the outrage shout that it seems to be.
Joe, have you felt much hate at all for your fine colleagues' prediction that got so much attention?
Not as much. Just to give you a quick story, there was a time Ross and I were both at a wedding, and a fella 7 rows ahead of us turned around and said, "I need to have a chat with you two." Put it down. That's not a big joke. That is true. He spoke to us straight after, so I felt a bit of it. I obviously haven't been the nicest on ports, but it's just that Ross has been a hell of a lot worse. That I seem to have got away with it. But I see where Ross is coming from. I had a similar feeling. I didn't think Portadown were going to be brilliant, and it sounds ridiculous to say that I still don't really think they were. They did enough. Where I struggle with Portadown is having any confidence in where they're going. Now, obviously, there's a change of manager, so you'll have to see where that goes. But under Niall, I didn't really see a game plan as such. It just felt a bit, I've said it before in this podcast, it felt a bit gung ho. Didn't really feel like there was a plan. It just kind of felt like they're my players out there. They'll do me a favor on that pitch, which doesn't really work. The fact they finished eighth and Ross has said 12th, it's almost hard to say they haven't had a good season, but that's more on paper. When you were watching them every week, I don't know if they had a brilliant season.
Realistically, they've been saved by 2 wins at the end of the season. If those wins don't happen, then they come 10th, which is still not what I said. But the point is even more so that the manager wasn't good enough. And then a new fella who's never managed before has come in and managed to get a tune out of them for 2 games. They were lucky that other teams were on the beach, and depending on who you listen to, Nal Curry, they were on the beach for a long while.
That comment does seem to have struck a chord, must be said, based on some social media activity.
It seems to have lost him his job at the end of it. I think there was a lot of insecurity amongst the Portadown fan base that they thought, Flip, he's maybe onto something here, and that's why the backlash was so much. Somebody had to come last in my predictions. You know what I mean? And who have put 11th isn't great either. And I didn't hear a jot out of Carrickfergus, but
I did for some reason.
Yeah, but listen, I think a lot of Portadown fans will, with the fullness of time, realise that hey, that Ross guy was probably on to something. That team wasn't good, and the manager definitely wasn't good.
Like, clown emojis put to the side here. I was surprised that I was so high, like position wise, to put Portadown 8th. Like, I see Portadown a fair bit just because of all the games that I get sent to for the radio, and it's a strange kind of team. Like, they've been helped by the fact that Eamon Fife has come to the fore as this big goal scorer for them. Will he repeat that next year? I don't think he came into the season as a real centre forward, but they've had to rely on him. I quite like Ukek as a player, but he's kind of in and out. That's a very divisive player within their ranks. So, like, we spent a bit of time in the other podcast talking about, like, David Jeffrey. This is a team resetting, not totally, but with a couple of the players that have gone, that are going. Mays went in the middle of the season. McCulloch is going to go. They've really locked in with these two centre backs of Alton Top and McKinnon. So look, they need to find a striker. Who doesn't? But they'll be going into next year with the hope that, of course, they'll not be relegated. They'll be in there for now, but it's all about what the transfer window brings up. I think it all looks rosy looking back, but they did come very close to being dragged into that significantly. And who's to say if they did get dragged into it, they could have recovered. And like plenty of teams had some stinking performances along the way. A very intriguing team going into next year. We go to 7th, and a team who surprised a lot of people and definitely left me with a bit of egg on my face.
I don't like this transfer window at all for Carrick. It gives me no faith whatsoever.
You see, I feel like this was me 2 years ago, and then they had the best season ever.
I understand the experience, and I do think experience is needed when you're down there struggling. What I don't like is that he's buying ex-players, and that might sound a bit strange, but I just feel like it never really works when you're bringing them down to lower teams. I just think it's going to be a case of zero faith for them whatsoever. I think they're right down there in 12th for me.
I think this transfer window works for them for this year. I think it's such a stopgap move. We'll paper over the cracks and we'll stay up this year, because see if half those transfers retire at the end of the season, you're not shocked at all. So I think they bring in enough quality with those names. Gallagher, Billy Joe Burns, just sort of one last dance. Leckie up top with Purchase, I think, is mouth-watering. I think that there's goals up there. I think it's fine for this year.
It's a bit mouth-watering in the year 2019, but still, So look, I'm not banging the drum saying here we go. Here comes, Carrick coming to reclaim their 7th place position, but I do have them in 11th. Why didn't I bang the drum more, Joe? I could have banged the drum, and I could have been a prince of Carrickfergus, but now, we didn't call this one right, did we?
Well, I'm convinced that's AI. That I don't think I said that. I wouldn't have been that far off. That is a real shocking prediction for me.
Like, some would argue, I'm not saying I am, but some would argue Carrick 12th is a worse tech than Port's 12th.
By the mouths, it literally is. Let's have it right. It literally is. But we weren't at flipping Taylor's Avenue recording videos. There was only one fan base led by their leader that took it thick enough. But anyway, whatever.
No, the only person that called me out for this was Ali, and he did it while I was on stage at the live podcast. So thank you very much for that. And he was right too. Clearly, I stick by what I say in a sense of the transfer window didn't excite me, and I thought it was a dangerous move. But fair play to them because it absolutely paid off, and there was players in there who massively stepped up. For those that listened to the team of the season, obviously Gibson got into both mine and Peters, and like players like that, and Heatley, I think sort of exceeded expectations in a way and did a lot for Carrick and got them into just an absolutely fantastic position.
What people are maybe forgetting is that, one, they were in cruise position coming into the season. Like, they were rubbish and one win away from home all year the season previous. And they had a lot to turn around to get into the position they are now. They have done that. But also, it's not like between like August and December they were doing anything exciting. I know it's one of the more remarkable results of the season. They got trolloped at home by Glentoran, and then everything turned around and they just couldn't lose. It was just, you might argue that we might be back at the same place doing maybe not Carrick 12th next year, but you're right. We said it there. A lot of these players are older. Will they go again? Will they be found out? And is this just a really, really, really great moment of momentum when elsewhere, when for pretty much the other times outside of this past few months, they've been honking?
And that's exactly it. There was a lot of times throughout the season where they really didn't look good at all. It's just that they managed to find that bit of form and click. And fair play to them. That's all they needed to do. And they've finished top of that bottom half, which is what more could Stephen Baxter really be asking for? They have a chance of Europe now. Personally, I can't wait to see Jordan Owens coming out of retirement for them next year.
It wouldn't be a crazy suggestion to put out there that they will probably continue to do what they're doing and back older, experienced players. It hasn't always been the absolute guarantee of success, but in modern times in the Irish League, it's worked more than it's failed.
It's worked all right for them. They're probably the form team in the league outside of Coleraine at the minute. The thought of them coming to Windsor Park is scary. Just off, they'll have won another couple of games to get there, and they will be bang up for it. And listen, they can put teams to the sword. They've beat us, they've held us to a draw, and they were very unlucky to lose this at Windsor Park earlier in the season. This is a good football team and a really good manager at the helm. Same as last year, as we're saying, will the legs survive another season? But you'd assume that they're going to recruit in the summer and sort of patch up those little holes that they do have. So things are sort of looking up for Carrick.
Absolutely. Uncle Rico and co aren't putting their money in for nothing, and they are getting players, and it's a unique mix. There's no point constantly worrying about the future. Let's worry about the now. Did they turn a corner and they're here to stay and they're here to be real? Or has this all just been a bit of a falsehood and they're going to come crashing down to earth later? Some big performances, like we didn't mention it in the team of this season episode 2. Like Luke McCulloch has been a nice piece for them. Billy Joe Burns has really pulled back the ears this season in this kind of right of the three at the back, and that's been good. Joe Crow has been as solid as you can be for what you describe as a bottom half centre midfielder. Physical, big, but they have been very dependent on Lecky, Gibson, and particularly Heatley. Who is going to replace them? They don't know, but maybe we don't know either. So, very successful season that they got 7th. They also, of course, won the Continental Shield, which is very nice. And, their fans got the chant Linfield suck at some games. So, there has been highs and a couple of lows, but overall in the green. We now go into the top half, and one of the more predictable predictions here, Dungannon Swifts.
Not saying that last season was a one-hit wonder. I don't think they'll do as well as last season. They're certainly an improved side, but I think you could maybe see them settling down a bit lower in the table this time.
I think they'll sort of have a bit of a regression towards their norm, more what you'd expect, just because there's that top four that we talked about, and I don't think anybody's going to break into that. But you look at them and you think that is comfortably a better side than Crusaders, probably in front of Cliftonville, and you just think if they play to their potential, the 5th is surely theirs as a minimum.
This is where I'm sitting. Home record will be key. Yeah, fifth for me. I think they'll be the best of the middle class.
I have them in 6th, but I don't see them going any lower than that.
You can see why we thought that they were going to continue on what they did last year. We spoke there on the team of the season how we're starting to feel that perhaps this era could be over, but it's been a great era. Another exit season for Dungannon. Yeah, it lost steam at the end of the season, but they didn't have to try. They did enough throughout the year to get the wins, to get the results, and to be in the top half. And for us, we were looking around and thought, no one else is going to take their spot, and that pretty much was the case. It wasn't as much of a monumental achievement as it was last year, was it?
No, not at all. There was that aspect of you were expecting them sort of to push on. Now, obviously, lost some players that were clearly influential and a big part of how the team ticks. But you kind of looked at Rodney and thought he could probably get a similar sort of tune out of some other players there, or other players that they brought in. But that didn't really turn out to be the case the way the season started. It was a real shock those first few games, which really didn't set them up well for the rest of the season. Obviously, got into the cup final, which is brilliant for them. They've still ended up in top 6, so they could still end up with Europe. But I think there will be an aspect of disappointing that they didn't really kick on from last year, even though there was a wee bit of a reset needed.
We've spoken about this. The next era of Dungannon isn't totally obvious to us right now.
No, they're really between two stools, if you like. It's hard for them to push on into that top four with them being a part-time club and one of the smaller part-time clubs at that. There probably was regression this year to a degree, and there might be more again next year. There's aging bodies in that team. They've given a lot to these last 2 seasons. So I think expectations just need to stay tempered, and let's not have people losing their minds if they drop the 7th or 8th next year. I think if they come 6th again, that's another great season.
I would have this team as a bit of a concern for a significant drop-off next year. Where are these forwards going to be coming from? Like, we saw a bit of Junior, we saw a bit of Kobe Moore, and like it's worked across the board. Like, I don't think they are going to crack the top 4. We would need an even bigger drop off than what we've seen with some of these other teams. I just think the floor for these full-time teams is so high that it really is going to take a big drop from them and a big rise from the Swifts. I think more and more McGovern's getting more credit for what he achieved there, and maybe some players will go, this has been fun, but it's time for me to move on. So maybe more questions around the Swifts than people would expect, because I've always found that back line for them to be a wee bit creaky. It's not particularly bend, not break. It can kind of shatter at times, but they know this, and they're going to have to find a striker some way, somehow, and maybe 2. And in the place that they are in, they're going to have to, whoever they go for, whoever they decide to go for, be it young, old, experienced, they're going to have to kind of blink and close their eyes ever so slightly and hope that the frog that they're going to kiss turns into the prince that they're all after. So it's overall excellent season for Swifts. Maybe just not as remarkable or has the same fireworks. Obviously, they get the final. That's nice, but don't win it overall.
Yeah, for that club to be making back-to-back Irish Cup finals, that's an achievement in itself. Nobody really fancies them going into these playoffs, which is maybe how Rodney will want it. But they haven't won a game since the start of March and the February, so form's not exactly on their side going into that. Obviously, they have been resting players and whatnot for the final, but I think it just shows that really they can't compete with those other teams that have landed in the top six with them.
You can maybe start talking about this as the number one part-time team in the country. We go to Cliftonville next, who finished fifth, and a lot of this stuff is going to sound like deja vu.
I really don't know how to feel about it. I would love there to be more transfers, but I have a real bad suspicion that there won't be.
Does that then set you up for a season of just middling, try and not drop too far, the youth that's in the squad, it's about developing them, getting a bit more team cohesion?
Jim's going to have to do a lot with the group of players that he has to try push on. I think we'll do better than last season overall. We were knocked by quite a few different things last season.
Would you really believe in your heart of hearts that top six is something that they're going to get?
Just about, yes, because a limited squad, sure, but the squad that they have it's made up of good players. Rory, he'll drive them on.
I'm saying seventh, but it's the one where if I'm looking back and it's fifth, I'm like, well, yeah, fair enough. I think I have to accept, Joe, they're a middle class team in this league.
It's tough to hear that, Peter. I'll not lie to you. It's very tough to hear that. I have us in fifth.
I think just on the money, it's too late anyway. If the money were to come in tomorrow, I think it's too late. All the good business has been done and you end up panicking. I've got them sixth.
The transfers never came, but the improvement in the league position did. But I think that's due to other teams just not stepping up to the mark.
Yeah, bit of a strange season. Yeah, the money never came, which is a real shame because I wasted a lot of money in Tim Hortons, thinking some way that could come back in the Cliftonville somehow.
Hey, don't totally discount that yet. Hey.
I'll certainly not be resting anything on it, but yeah, like I said it earlier about Ballymena, Cliftonville very similar. It kind of just felt like a bit of a nothing season. Obviously, County Antrim Shield final, Irish Cup semi final, but in terms of in the league, didn't really feel like there was too much going on. Struggled, as you say, deja vu, struggled again, squad depth, injuries, no real sort of standout signing or anything coming in, and having to really dig deep a lot of the times and ask players to do a lot more than what's expected of them. But you said it there in terms of becoming a bit of a middle class team. When I'm looking at the four ahead of them and even the gap difference in points, it's like how do we break into that in this sort of part-time versus full-time thing that's developing?
You've got to be on your game. I still feel like something's going to happen here with it. I'm not totally living in a world where I think something is going to happen at Cliftonville. Like, I think they're just too much of an attractive prospect for someone not to go, let's invest money and let's try and build stuff up here, because the project has potential. Now, 5 does not go into 4, and how that really impacts those teams, because it's very likely that Lauren, Coleraine and Glentoran and Linfield all get Europe this year, and then they'll be able to build upon that platform and will be setting themselves up with the idea that they're going to do the same next year. Cliftonville, no matter how much is put up front, if it does come, aren't going to be able to work that way, so that they're just going to have to be better in every way, better in recruitment, better in coaching, better in the big games, try and not falter in the small ones. When I look back at this season in particular for Cliftonville, like, Ross, purgatory is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, similar to Ballymena, but just in the top half, nothing season really, nothing really going on. Came close in all of the cups. I think they went out of all of them on penalties. Disappointed in Europe, went out the Gibraltar opposition and just haven't really pulled up any trees. Even Boxing Day, losing on Boxing Day at home, just nothing really going on. There's a grey cloud hanging over that club by the seam of things. Just every part of it, obviously all the turmoil with the board and the directors, no investment coming in. And purgatory is exactly right, because realistically they're not gonna push into that top four unless the funding does come in. And as you say, even then, that's no guarantee. So just sort of stuck. And we'll get on to talk about Linfield, but it could go a similar way for them as well.
We were talking about Cruz there, about how all these young players are there, but none are, outside of Bryden, none have really taken that big leap where you think, oh, this guy could be a real player within the league. I think Cliftonville have that. They have a history of that. I like McGarry at the back, but he needs a lot of seasoning. He's very young. We saw the real progression of Sheridan and Hawthorne. You brought in Healy. Is McStravick going to take that leap? He's had his moments throughout there. Like, Gormley's still the man coming on and scoring double-digit goals, from the bench and doing his moments. And you need a bit of everything to kind of make this pot. But for example, is Magilton going to be the man that takes you into the next era? I think, regardless of what happens, Cliftonville are going into next season surely has to be in a better place. They'll have a chance to really recruit. I felt like they couldn't even recruit the most basic of players in the summer. They were able to make some moves in January. And yeah, it's. I'm not expecting them to go really big name. Like, one of the names that we haven't talked about, and people are going to forget they're even an Irish League player, forget Cliftonville player. I think Reece Campbell's going to be a big name to return next year. Will he be able to be at the same quality of standard? We don't know. But for a season where some people genuinely were talking about them falling down, where they're in that cruise zone, I think they recovered well. But they do need a lot of players to take a step up.
Yeah, and my thing is, Peter, how many times have we been on this podcast saying that? And I think next season does become so important in a sense of it needs to improve. Otherwise, you do start asking questions. Like, I don't think in any way Jim should be removed at this point. I think he is a very good manager. I think it's a good management team as a whole, not just him. And the recruitment's been, if you look at the recruitment 2 years ago, good players, obviously. It's more just a case of when those players move on, how well are you replacing them? What slightly worries me is I don't know how close we're getting to needing almost like a reset that Crusaders are having. When you get rid of like when Gormley retires and Addis isn't exactly getting younger, these real key players in the team, when you need to start replacing them, is it a case of a full team reset? And that can be quite worrying if it's not handled correctly.
But you did lose Keeney in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
And he was a bit of a star man as well.
It was noticed. Yeah, that was massively noticed.
So,
but not replaced properly.
No, but it's hard. It's hard.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I'm not as down on it as maybe some people may feel. Like you've got Healy in there. What will he look like with a bit of pre-season underneath him and how everybody else comes together? I'll say this, and this may seem like a slag. You may see it as a slag, but I don't see a mass exodus of people picking these players off. Maybe I'll be wrong, but even players like Kearney going, like he was a nice piece, and you've just had to constantly rotate. Nadas is just, and Hale are looking around going, who are all these guys? Like I expect maybe Curran to step aside and others, and like this is not an 11 you look at now and think, oh, these guys are gonna really tear it up next year. But you can see improvement, and if you can see that bit more connections to it. The reason I just bring up the idea of maybe things changing with Jim, it's just that if new owners do come in, do they see him as the man? Do they have someone behind the scenes that they maybe want to bring in? I'm maybe getting too ahead of myself, but look, I think they should be well within the right next year to maybe have a more comfortable ascension towards the top six. But as we've mentioned before, it's just a different feel for this Cliftonville side compared to previous years where you're maybe, an outsider for the title. I mean, there's dark horses and then there's whatever you guys are going to be going in the next season. We'll just have to park all that feeling of it all. But I mean, 7 up to 5th. I think plenty of people would shake your hand for that next year for whatever their team is.
Yeah, top of that non-full-time table. So it's not a huge win, but still something to be talked about.
Okay, we're getting into the business end and the top 4. Ross, stand by. Linfield, 4th. Do you have them as champions this year, Ross?
Yes, I do. It's maybe the team where you most clearly can see how it goes wrong.
I agree. I really agree. It's not going to be a defensive blow-up,
No.
I don't think.
Because like you can see already in the European games, struggling a little bit going forward. And yes, it's a difficult tie against Shelburne, but like give it a go at least. You're at home and you're 1 goal behind. Give it a go.
Joe, have you got the Linfield blue and white ribbons around the Gibson Cup come the end of 2025-26?
I do, unfortunately.
There's a scenario where I see, for example, Fitzpatrick being player of the season and Linfield not winning the league. But you see if Offord's player of the year at the end of the season, Linfield have won the league. I think many people see them as the favourites going into this season. Not for me, second.
This year, if things aren't going right, and the crowd was down in numbers last year and it was down in attitude.
They won the league by 20 points, wasn't it? Or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But
they won the league before the split.
Yes,
so there's a big turnaround to happen for someone else to take that off them, which of course I'm predicting. But
I just think it's too early for those teams at the moment. I don't think they have that give it over the line that we're talking about. Whereas I think Linfield do still have it. If things are down and the crowd is against them, they're almost used to that now, those players.
That's no way to win a league. Being used to your own crowd being on your back.
It's not, but it's going to happen again.
It is, absolutely is, because you can see that yes, it's like defensive football and it works because we keep clean sheets and then we get a goal. But like it's boring as get out.
I 100% agree. I in no way do I think yous are winning the league the right way. I just think yous will win the league again.
You were right about the crowd stuff. Why do you think you were so believing that Linfield could be champions again? Because we've seen what happened. They were 4th, and I mean we had a crisis podcast. Let's be real, and we pinpointed what the issue was going to be up front. Honking, Fitzy did his thing. Your mate Fitzpatrick, did his thing, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah, Matt, as I now call him, he did his best. Unlucky with Offord getting injured. But everything I've said there, I want to say again: rubbish football, boring defensive football. The crowd was down. The whole atmosphere around the place is awful. I'll always back my team at the start of a season, and biggest club in the country on the island. You have to back them to win the league because that's what the expectation is at that club. But I don't think it will be going into next year. Just it looks really bleak at the minute.
Strong words, Joe, but I'm sure you've been hearing a version of this take pretty much for months.
Yeah, often through tears and the likes. Look, we'll come to the other teams. My thought around Linfield was mostly the experience and the fact that they've kind of been in the position that they're in now of there's clearly issues, but they just kind of managed to get around it. I said it there. I don't think they do it in the prettiest way when they win the league often. I think I don't really enjoy watching them. I thought something similar would happen, but as I said, the only reason I thought they would win the league is because other teams wouldn't be ready. Obviously, that turned out not to be the case, but we'll get to that.
I was confident about them too. Like, we had a nice little run to the end of the season that drew in a lot of fans. We didn't have a big twist there, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Like, to recall, Linfield won it at a canter before the split. Hadn't been done before. They were not pounding on teams, but they just took everything in their stride. In many ways, it kind of had a lot of the hallmarks of what we've seen with Larne this year. And we just did not expect this kind of boring Linfield to turn out to be the team that was in crisis. Like, we are looking into next year already, and we're talking about the idea of, oh, could somebody maybe sneak into the top four? Well, you all know whose place people might be taking, and it's Linfield's.
Yeah, the other three full-time teams are so far ahead of Linfield in in
That's a bit far.
in
Like,
terms in
I don't.
terms of behind the scenes. In terms of behind the scenes, they're so far ahead of Linfield. It's untrue. From shambles to crisis all season, there has been just issue after issue, hidden by a couple of good bursts of form. The pod May and Mark did then coincided with a great run of form, and everyone's thinking, what are they talking about? But the underlying stuff was always there. We were out of the title race in February, realistically, which is no place for Linfield to be. We were out of the Irish Cup even before that. To be for your whole season to be coming down to one game against Glentoran to have a chance at a European spot is not good enough for Linfield. But it's where we deserve to be off the basis of the teams, of the styles of play, of the background stuff. The Linfield are so clearly anchored into being the fourth best team in the league at the minute. I think Linfield are the ones that are in purgatory, because I can't see us pushing on to that top three, but I can't see anyone catching us either. And the board seem to be happy enough with that. So I think it'll be staying that way for a wee while.
Like, they have been one of the stories of the season, Joe. Like, there's no doubt about that.
100%, and I think just how far down they managed to slide in that table once the form started to wobble is quite a surprise. Like, I appreciate, don't want to get too into the weeds, but like, Ross, what does need to change? Because it doesn't really sound like it's just a case of recruitment and management that got you into this position. And like, I know I always joke around when you're talking about your predictions and how bad Linfield are going to be, but it really does feel like this has been building for 4 years, but now is the real. It's actually hit, even though he's been winning leagues in that time.
This has been bubbling under since Lauren won their first league, and I said last year that we did well to win the league and won at the canter and stuff, but that was because Lauren had ambitions elsewhere, and the Glens weren't up to the challenge at that time. They definitely are now. Coleraine definitely are now, and Lauren are going to be Lauren. So what needs to change is, not to be dramatic, but near enough nigh on everything. Like, we're going into next season with a threadbare squad. Jamie Mulgrew, who I will never say a bad word against as a footballer, as a player, he's been given a year contract, what seems like to be a body. We're going into a season where our star man up front, we don't know if he's going to be at the club or if he's going to be going back to teaching. That should have been sorted a long time ago. I think we're at the point where we need investment, but the way the club is set up and ran upstairs, I don't know why you would invest to get 49% of a club when however many unelected board members actually get the say on top of the elected ones. But it's a tough sell for me, to be honest.
I always find the discussion around investment in Linfield quite confusing based on just the revenue that can be made from the shop, from the attendance that you guys have, dwindling as much it currently is at the minute. Like, based on vibe not good. Team wise on the pitch, we're expecting a lot of changes, and we just don't know if we're going to see them replaced in the right way, or the players brought in that will make you guys proper, title contenders again. And Linfield and their lack of recruitment, or the lack of winners in their recruitment, it has been talked about a lot in this podcast. And, it's just going to be interesting to see how drastic people who are in charge at Linfield take this. Like, they've got a fight to get Europe. If Europe doesn't happen, disaster for them and what they're hoping to do, just from a money point of view. And look, there's talk of some, quite interesting and surprising names going to Linfield next year. I don't know if there's a track record that would say players like that are exactly what they should be going for. But look, they've got competition, more competition than maybe they've ever had. When has there ever been in the league 3 other teams who are willing to match Linfield in ambition and in how much they're paying their players? Yes, they've had tough battles for the league with Glentoran over the past few decades, Cliftonville, Crusaders, etc., but never all at the same time to the extent that they're at.
This is the whole thing. The board, and a lot of elements of the club still think of it as we're Linfield, players should want to come to us anyway. And now that we aren't competing at the top end and that we aren't competing financially, there seems to be everybody's looking around thinking, what's happened? Why is nobody coming here? It's because why would you want to go and play in front of a 5% full stadium full of misery guts like myself?
I was just gonna say there.
Yeah, who should get behind the team more. It's not a why would you go to Linfield basically, and that's almost been the case for a good while. But the reason has been because they're the biggest club in the country, and they're going to win something at the end of the year. But that's no certainty at all now.
Well, I think that's what it is one of the biggest things for me. And you saw that around the likes of Joel Cooper and stuff, where it was almost an expectation of why would you be going for why would you be going to Coleraine for that certainty and the financial aspect when you could stay here at Linfield and it's Linfield, which doesn't work. And that instability, you're seeing it around Fitzpatrick and stuff at the moment as well, where the decisions just aren't being made. And for me, that Mulgrew signing is just a big hint that nothing's going to change. No harm to Jamie, but I just think that's a clear indication of I don't think they see that they're doing anything wrong. It's just going to stay the same way.
Is there a lack of ambition at the Blues? I just feel like I'm hearing more excuses or more sense of like, it's like it feels like with Linfield there's like a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy being concocted of, you know, if and when it all goes wrong or full-time football, you know, can't be paid for, etc. Some people will go, see, we told you. You know, and I'm not saying just because, you know, other people are doing it doesn't mean they need to keep up with the Joneses and how they sign players and the money that they spend. Like, let's be fair. Like last January, they spent, you know, a significant chunk on both Alford, who they've been without, and then Morrison, who, like, it didn't work out at all. But then here he is, still pull up trees once again in Scotland. Like it's a strange one. Like, you know, when you make a mistake, you're going to have to try and fix it, and that's where Linfield are. It's almost like what people are talking about is guaranteed to happen because I'm yet to really hear, believe, or see that they are going to change it. It's like they almost want to be proven right, that their negativity was they were right to say. Does that make sense?
There seems to be a lot of elements in the club that do want to go back to part time. Is that to say I totally?
Well, then fourth is guaranteed every year, then potentially.
Well, the whole thing seems to be that you have to win the league once every 2 or 3 years to then get it far enough into Europe to have the money to sustain full time. That just doesn't seem like it's going to happen at any point. And then the money that is there is being thrown up the walls. That Morrison signing was doomed to fail from the start. So you have to wonder, like, what is the due diligence? There's a lot of cloudiness around Linfield. Who actually decides to sign these players? Because it seems to be the last word goes to this team committee, which is made up of board members and the head of recruitment and the manager. So did they all agree on Morrison or did they not? Who was it had the final say on letting Joel Cooper go? The problem is there's just no accountability in the club. The manager seems to have the safest job in Irish League football. And then the fact you don't even know who's responsible for these failed signings over and over and over again, and who's responsible for letting these players go that go on to prosper. 3 board members went up for re-election at the AGM and all 3 were re-elected. So there's no change at that level. So I don't know. I don't know. The whole thing seems just a bit rotten at the minute, and it just doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon.
Death, taxes, Ross claiming calamity at Linfield.
This one's legit. Looking back on other seasons, Jeepers, I would take second to Lauren in a heartbeat, but I just
Well,
think there's a bit of a terminal decline happening here.
like I said, I think we all thought that perhaps just Linfield were going to keep on doing boring Linfield stuff and it wasn't going to enthrall, but at least it was going to look effective table wise. I feel like I did this end of season podcast a couple of weeks ago with you and Mark McGuigan. So I mean, it's out there if you want to hear more in depth. You can get into where Linfield got to that point where they're out of the cup. Yeah, like I've been kind of looking forward to this January transfer window and Linfield for ages, and I look forward to it with bated breath. Might be nothing. We go to third now, and I think one of the big winners of this season. They almost kind of ruined it for themselves. For what it could have been, you probably argue that they did. And third, Glentoran. But Patrick Hoopen is Patrick Hoopen, and is probably going to get more wins from absolute despairing games than most people who aren't fans of Glentoran would like to admit. He is going to fix a lot of problems if he can stay fit.
You know how old he is?
Doesn't matter. He's big, and I think he's got a point to prove after that whole situation with Derry.
There's players in there that on paper I think should have a good season. But I just think it's going to be one of those things where they may well start the season well. I can see them falling apart, and we're sitting here 6 months down the line going, we should have really predicted that this was going to happen. I don't. I have high hopes for them.
I have high hopes for them. I in a kind of boring way. I actually think they'll still be within a title shout come December. I still think they'll be about there.
Jinker squad's better than it was last year.
I think on paper probably isn't the better squad, but I do think how it will work will be better, if that makes sense. I think they probably had bigger names last season, but in terms of how this team will perform, I think will be a bit more solid.
I kind of like their attacking outlet. I've got them as third.
I've got them fourth because for me it boils down to they had three players in the team of the year last year and they're all out the door and they haven't been replaced to the same level. So I think you're just going to naturally have a drop off there, and I think there's just three teams that are better than them, to be honest.
I see it more as a top two with a solo third, and then the Glen sitting down in fourth.
We were hurt before. Many Glens fans will feel as though they were hurt before. But a genuine season of progression. Is this the new Glens? And are they here to stay, Joe?
They have to hope it's the new Glens that are here to stay. Huge improvement from them. Like they didn't do that fall apart that we're used to. I think they would still be disappointed. In a sense of how the season could have ended for them. I don't think they quite pushed on the way they did, and you saw them in some of the big games. There were some individuals who maybe faltered a wee bit, as well as the team as a whole. And there was a lot of questions being asked from the fans as well as to why they couldn't get past the big games. But credit to them because they definitely have improved massively. It's the best Glentoran side I've seen throughout a season in a long time.
Not a massively high bar, that, but a true statement all the same, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, that probably says quite a bit about it. Like it certainly isn't a high bar, but as you said, you would expect them, or you expected them to be in around the title in December, and to be fair to them, they still were come the split. So
Yes.
we haven't seen that from Glentoran.
Ross, what did Glentoran do right? Bar, of course, the big R word, recruitment.
They got it together this year to the highest extent they have. This is the most worried I've ever been about Glentoran winning a league, and a couple of results here and there change, and they're right up there. What did they get right? Your boy Hooven up front wasn't too bad. He got them a lot of
Grandpa Paddy did a decent job in the end.
He did all right. He did. He's 46. You know that, but
Listen,
He was there for the first moon landing.
I've already grovelled about Pat Hooban on the other podcast, so I'm not going to do it twice. So go and listen to that other one. But yeah, he was really good. The fear is if his goals dry up, I don't think anybody else got double digits for the Glens, so that's a concern. And you just have to wonder how good could this season have been if the IFA and every referee weren't completely against them, you know?
Yeah, missed penalties along the way, decisions that just didn't go perfectly in their favour. I've said this a few times over the past number of weeks. I'm sorry if it feels a tiny bit repetitive. There is a bit of a lightning in a bottle element to this season. Like Kamsa Kamara pretty much confirming on social media, off skis boys, I'm away here. And he'll be hard to replace. I think you maybe have it already in Larmer, who didn't get a massive chance this year just due to injury. So you can only do so much and kind of bring in the players that you can, and it's all kind of that money ball. Can you do it? And then the algorithm, like, you're right. Hooban is unlikely to just totally dominate in those games that he did. We've also spoken about how before perhaps he just doesn't do it in the big games. But yeah, Cammy Palmer might be someone that's difficult to replace. Is Stewart going to have a similar year? They will need to find new bodies, and will that work? Well, that's what we're going to have to look forward and see. But as much as it all fell down, and you might argue that there's still kind of hallmarks of old Glentoran teams, particularly in how they fluffed their lines on numerous occasions to potentially even lift the Gibson Cup. I mean, they were still sweating there on Saturday, hoping Coleraine was going to beat the Swifts. They're back in Europe. That's good for them. And they look like a sensible place to be, So it's just about, can they nail those players who will want to play full-time football in Northern Ireland, because you can see a decent bit of decline if they don't replace some of the players that are expected to go.
Yeah, and I think leaning into that lightning in the ball that you're talking about, the one downside I give for their recruitment is those loan players seem more like foundation players that they wanted to build on, which I don't really think you can do with a loan player because they're only there for a year, maybe two max. For me, a loanee should be someone who's adding a wee bit more on top of a decent foundation that you're building along the way. So the replacement of those players is so key for next year. Without that, you could easily see Glentoran of old slipping back in again.
What do you think has to happen for Devine to be out of a job?
He just finished third. What are you talking about?
This isn't coming from me. This is Glentoran fans that seem to really turn on him after that Coleraine game.
Yeah.
Oh, like he's not a winner, all this here carry on. I think it's very harsh. They've had a great season, and the video of the Coleraine showgrounds where they're all shouting, "You don't deserve us," hilarious, but also mental, because that's as good a Glentoran team you'll see in years and years.
I completely agree. I was so shocked to see, and leading back to when I started talking about Glentoran there, I said there was a lot of questions online about we can't get past the big games, and it's because of him. And I was shocked to read that. I didn't think that was in any way massively fair to say that you're going to now go ahead and get rid of him. So I'm shocked.
So someone else is going to come in and say, pass the ball here, do a bit this, or have some sort of miraculous speech, and that's the difference. Is a bit of pump up music. That's what's going to change it significantly. Like I don't really see how, based on what they have, that they were going to change it up massively. And in turn, it's not like their recruitment has been particularly stellar during this full-time era. Like they feel like they felt like they were ahead of the game in this bit of investment, and now we have seen not only Larne win now their third title, but here's Coleraine in the space of a year usurp them in the pecking order in the league, and also win the Irish Cup. I know Glentoran have won the Irish Cup.
COVID didn't count. Didn't count. Fake trophy, unfortunately.
Okay, well, would Rory Higgins have changed Glentoran's position in the league significantly?
I don't think so. I think Devine is probably one of the better things about Glentoran, and that's just what the Glentoran faithful have been saying online that he's maybe not the man. But I don't. If I were a Glen man, God forbid, I would be happy enough with Declan Devine as
But
manager.
well, some people online say that I am, so I'll tell you how we really
How
feel.
how the Oval feels.
How the other feels. Yeah, look, uh, it's just going to be strange because if it doesn't go swimmingly early next year, how will they react? You know,
Well,
that's.
I'd give a pretty good guess of how they'll react. They're a very level-headed bunch. Those guys over at the Oval, I'm sure they'll not jump
I
to any
think
rash decisions.
I think many Glentoran fans would have bitten your hand off for the season they've had this year.
100%, as they should have done. As they should have done. I would just like to know the six presumably Glenmen who have bookmarked around the grounds tweeting Joy Division. Do they have any plans to use those tweets, or have have you missed the boat on that?
Well, the problem is his which tweet, which
I'll
Joy
take your
Division
pick. Take
tweet,
your pick.
because I mean, there's plenty. Okay, there you go. Glentoran third, well done. What could have been. We now go up to second, and Coleraine. I think this squad's so good that they're going to win the league. I think this league's going to be a big battle between Linfield and Coleraine. I think it'll be close, and I do think that the safe pick is Linfield, and they have all the experience to do it. But I just think where Linfield could get caught out in those games we talked about where they're not scoring goals, I think Coleraine will win more 3-2s in a good way.
If you look at just names, you're thinking, yeah, that's a team that should definitely be challenging for the league. But I think just because it's Coleraine and because they've all just come together all at once, I can't really see it going the full way to completion.
Them and Linfield are definitely the two teams this season. I just think Linfield have a bit more in terms of experience. I just think it's maybe a season too early for Coleraine.
Fair.
Um, whether or not they get that chance again next year is another question.
And let's just not forget the man who will probably get all the credit if they do well this season. Joel Cooper's Joel Cooper. He could beat teams by himself. I just think this is a big, meaty team who can score goals, and I wouldn't want to play them. They came a lot closer than people expected. Obviously, I thought they were going to eventually win it. They didn't. But what a really nice 2026. They started well, had their moments, but for all the people that said, this team's got to be nowhere near it, they're miles off it, they were wrong. They signed well, and at times they were the real deal.
100%. And I think they showed in the split just how good they could be, and in the Irish Cup final as well. They showed in glimpses throughout the season how formidable they'll be when they start to find that consistency, and why they likely will win a league in the next few years, I think. And as I said there, I just thought this was a season too early for them, but they run it a lot closer than I thought they would. Maybe slightly because Lauren started to falter a wee tiny bit in the likes of the split, but yeah, I thought they were absolutely superb at times.
What an end of the season. They were leaving nothing out there. I can't remember the last time they didn't win. And the Irish Cup win, I think, is going to be massive. I said it on the last pod, winning is a habit, and now that they've all won something now, that whole team, and that can really be used to push on. Scary proposition going into next year, this Korean team.
Yeah, they're willing to try and mix it up really with their recruitment. They bring in a couple of young starlets throughout the league. They backed a significant amount of the team that they already had. They bring in well trodden Irish League players and Joel Cooper, and then you might even say Cody Lance Foster. I mean, not everybody's coming out here smelling the roses, but bit of random players from the English pyramid, the odd kind of hero from the League of Ireland, maybe taking a step back in their career. It's all kind of worked, and I think if you were to put a bet right now, they're maybe favourites for next year.
I'd struggle to look past them.
Yeah, they're my favourites at the moment.
So, in the end, what have they done right? What did they do that people didn't think they were going to do? Is it because you've just seen other kind of could be profits that have failed, and they thought, well, Coleraine are going to be the same? Like, in all fairness, before this year, it was sixth forever, and they just couldn't get out of it. There was, Coleraine doing Coleraine things was kind of on the regular.
I think it's just the way they've brought in, as you say, that blend of outsiders to the league, but then also your Levi Ives, your Joel Coopers, tried and tested, been there, done that in the Irish League. The criticism was almost that anyone would sign Joel Cooper, and it's like, yeah, of course you would. He's the best player in the league, and they've brought him in, and he's done exactly as they would have wanted him to do. So I think recruitment's the buzzword of this pod, but they got it absolutely spot on, and as I say, I don't think you can look past them at this stage for next year.
It's all been not totally boring, but like they've all just done it with very little drama. It helps they've got the backing. There's no doubt about that. That it's such a key part of the cog for their success story. So let's not diminish that. But the players have worked hard and they look like they've been up for it continually. They want to win, just for their own push. And I like where they're going. Like they get this nice mix of players, and I think next year they'll have a mark on their back, right? You know, people will treat them even more differently than they did this year. And I think maybe a mix of those big games, getting across the line in the final, that's probably where we're going to see the big difference. Is that, you know, they get a kind of blood and thunder lucky win, you know, late on the first game of the season against Larne. You know, and as the season went on, they, you know, continually lost to Glentoran. And, you know, we saw Larne and the Glens both need wins against them, and even there in the Irish Cup against Larne. And they really delivered on the big stage. Can they keep everybody happy? Can they find another couple of gems? With them, we talk about some teams having to go for lottery tickets. Coleraine, they're banned loads, doesn't matter. You know, they're banned safer bets. And if they fail, so what? A core comes in, nice piece, probably going to go away. You know they're very easily going to sign about 2 of them next year, and only one of them need to fit the bill. It's a very envious position that they're in. But we kind of expect them to continue on this. I'm not saying they're guaranteed champions next year, but you would expect that they'll remove some of the moments of weakness and some of the mistakes that meant that they did miss out on the title this year, especially the way the first half of the season went.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing for them to look back to that first half of the season, because that's kind of where they lost it, really. And they lost it in those games, like against, I think, what did they lose to Glentoran 3 times or 2 times in Drew or something, maybe?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of points lost against them that you can really pinpoint down into, even though it's early in the season, it really matters at the end. And I think that's where they'll aim to build next year in terms of being a lot more serious from the start. And I talked about it in the pre-pod of I thought it was just a season too early, and I think that first half maybe showed it. I'm surprised at how much things started to click in the second half of the season. I thought what we're seeing now in the second half was what we'd see in the beginning of the 26-27 season.
Well, in the end, it wasn't meant to be, as retaining their title and champions, the much doubted, if you listen to their fans, Larne FC. This is a new era without our friend Kenny Bruce. I would worry about them being the same kind of presence within the league, but here's what I like, and I think there's a trend coming here, right? They've got 85 strikers, and sometimes they play them all at the same time. Love it.
Yeah, it's certainly a brave way of playing, isn't it? I just think last season, obviously the amount of games they played massively had an impact, and they just went so under the radar that when it got to the end of last season, you're like, oh, Larne are actually still a pretty decent side. I think that'll be the case again this year. As I say, as I hinted at earlier, I have them in third, but a bit of a solo third. I don't think they're good enough to challenge Coleraine and Linfield. I think the changes with Rooney and stuff probably taking the helm this time will have a bit of an impact.
See all those names you just mentioned. How many times did they score against Auda of Latvia at home, in inverted commas? And how many times did they score against Pristina of Kosovo at home?
Yeah, and that's why I don't have them near the title. That's why I have them as fourth.
Jeepers, Peter.
Wow.
Second for me, just because I think less European distractions. I can't see them going all the way into the league fees again. I just think they'll be more like themselves. there's a lot more stability. I think if you're going to see potential instability, it's going to come at the tail end of this season.
Well, in all fairness, you can claim that. Like, fourth was rogue. We all slept on Larne. You know, they can claim the we showed you. But in all fairness, it just felt as though consistency was their strength. And week in, week out, they claimed the points, rarely looked rattled. And while other teams had their moments, they didn't falter.
That's just Lauren packaged up neatly, isn't it? Just juggernaut, said every year. Just what a team. In the end, the strikers did seem to get firing, and there came a point where it looked absolutely inevitable that they were going to win the league. They tried their best to make it interesting at the very
They
end,
did.
but just too much for the rest of the league. In the end, the only blot in their copybook will be no Irish Cup, but that's bound to come at some point.
Yeah, it's hard to really talk a huge amount about Larne because, you know, this is the team that like had so many games at the end of last season, and it was hard. They just ran out of spunk. They ran out of juice, but they came back refreshed, albeit with Rooney, which we all forget, in charge. They stuck with continuity and gave it to Gary Haverin, and he sailed the ship home, Joe.
Yeah, he did. And Rooney was the reason I had them further down the league. I was unsure on
I would agree.
the certainty there. What I didn't see was one, them making well, whatever happened there in terms of getting rid of him so early in the season, but also Gary coming back in and being just as strong as he was, which probably, looking at it now, makes sense considering what he'd done before. Um, I think it's absolutely fantastic what they've done. They just are such a solid side, as both of you guys have said. Turns out having, as we said last week, having a great defense does win you leagues at the end of the day if you can still score up top. So it's looking at it, I guess, without Rooney there, it's maybe no surprise. And that's a question, I suppose. Do you think if Rooney is still there, I was still looking at Lauren at the top of the league?
No, I just think Haven's real strength is knowing that squad. Like, he was there for the other championships. He's been in there and about, and it's just about having that guiding hand. And, you know, it's been talked a wee bit about by people like myself, where I think this feels like part one of the end of that double winning year, and they've had a bit of a reprise here with the victory, even with, like, you know, Andy Ryan in there. But, you know, Andy Ryan, I guess behind the scenes reporting is that he's likely to move on, and with that, you know, they did need him this year. At the back, they look solid, and looks like they've got kind of similar kind of players who will fill those roles. But, you know, question marks over midfield, and how they build up shape wise, and maybe just they ran out of steam at the end of the season, and will that look similar next year? Like, I do think we've talked about all the other teams around them. Linfield, disaster. Coleraine finding their feet, and to be honest, came close. Glens had their moments, failed to take charge of those. It's unlikely all the other teams are going to have that. Don't want to take any credit away from Larne. They did it. It's hard. 3 out of 4 puts them in really unique, you know, territory for them. And they've won the league. Didn't concede a lot. Fantastic stuff for them.
Do you think he's fair then for manager of the season?
Manager of the season is one of the weirder awards. Like,
Feels a bit boring, doesn't it?
yeah, it's like, oh, you
Yeah,
know, like, yeah,
won the league.
probably because he steadied the ship. He was able to get everything going here. But the task will be now next year and this summer. Where do they go? What do they do? Because they added new names in January, which we talked a lot about, and they have players maybe not a lot of people are thinking about up top, you know, O'Connor and stuff like that. But I expect that there will be changes. It's just who do they bring in? Because, like, they will face, in the same way we're talking about Linfield, they will face competition from the Glens as well as Coleraine. And there used to be a situation where every time Lauren signed anybody, be it a name that you knew or someone you've never heard of, they knocked it out of the park. I'm not saying there's a huge amount of stinkers on their recent copybook, but it's just not the same in the same way. So they've got a lot to live up to now going into next year. But I don't know. Do you stress too much about that? If you're a Larn fan, you've just won a title. You never. Many Larn fans think they would have never won a title ever in their lifetime, and now they've got 3 in 4 years. So there'll be people sitting there going, "You doubted us earlier on in the season, and now you're already doubting us next year. Watch us go."
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really understand that they're still keeping this. Oh, we're little old Larn, and everybody's writing us off. It's like, well, yeah, because you have probably the top 2 money in the league. A bit disappointed not to appear in that little montage they made of all the criticism on social media. So something to work on for next year. But Lauren low key had a wee bit of an unsteady season. There was a lot of all the stuff with Rooney going on. There was ownership stuff going on in the background. Other controversies happening. For me, that goes one of 2 ways next year. You see a settled Lauren and they go on rampage again, or it goes the other way and everything sort of sets in and all those problems rear their head again and there is that drop off. Hard to tell at this point, but I think we've all learned our lesson from last year. You just can't rule them out as we did.
Yeah, like I don't expect a big fall off next year, but people always talk about the idea that, it's harder to retain a championship compared to winning it, and that looks like it's going to be the reality for them. It's going to be a big task. I think to do it again, but they've done it previously. 2 doubles in 5 years. I'm sure sounds great, but they've achieved all they achieved with all those things that you said: change of manager, ownership not being totally locked in the same way that they had been before. We spent a lot of time talking about how some teams, what do they look like going into next year? On the whole, there's not a huge amount of holes that they're going to have to fill. There's going to be changes. There's going to be turnover. Of course there is. It's the nature of a club at this level. Their big thing is how can they improve, because they think they're going to have to improve to go again next year. Previous records would say that they have the contacts and they also have the ability to find those out. It just doesn't seem clear that there's players within the league currently that can get them there. Midfield's a question. Shape-wise might be a question. Do they have... they have all those strikers, but, some will change and move on. Will they be in a similar kind of position? Will there be a change of shape, change of formation? Perhaps. But again, this year, we've talked about it pretty much all season. They did it the way that they often did. Maybe not as flashy as other years, but they stood up, and the league has never won across a 4-week, 6-week stint. It's won across an entire season, and time again, they rarely faltered. So congratulations, but it all starts again very, very soon.
It's all just teed up so nicely already for next year, and I just can't wait to be let down and disappointed all over again.
Well, gang, that's our lot for the season review pod, which means my time here hosting this podcast for this season comes to an end. 4th series, I always feel like it starts and then all of a sudden it's over amongst a couple of weeks where it just goes on and on and on and on. A good one, like we reached 150 in this season. For me, in this next season, you don't know. You like to think so, but things could change. You just don't know. So you'll know as soon as I know. As always, make sure you follow the podcast on all the platforms. Make sure you follow these guys around the grounds NI on all the platforms, just to even have a go and tell them off. Obviously, the biggest highlight for me, guys, I think ever since just doing this podcast flat out, but particularly this season, was the live show. Obviously did one last year, which was nice. Don't do it on a Northern Ireland game ever again. But the one later on the summer, to do 2 last year, was bonkers. But it was great. Lovely success. And no guarantees I'll do that again. But like I said, follow and you'll be the first to hear about it.
What a season.
But if you can, I would be there, guys. That's what I'd say.
Without a doubt.
Listen, if there's a live pod, I'm there. Be that on the stage, in the audience, serving drinks. I'll do whatever.
Happy just to be there to make the tea. Congratulations on another series, Peter.
Another big year.
Well, just we'll park that there, guys. It's been a pleasure. Season 4 kick a match, in the books. Let's see what joy leads us in the future. Chat to you soon.
See you, Peter.